You heard it at 2 in the morning, and it sounded human. A scream, or a screech, or something crying just past the tree line. And you lay there frozen in your bag, heart pounding, convinced something was hurt or hunting, or standing right outside your tent wall. Here's the problem. Most campers get this wrong almost every single time, and it's not because they're careless or inexperienced. It's because the sound is genuinely built to fool you. Your brain in the dark, with no visual to check against, defaults to the worst-case explanation every time. Tonight, we're breaking down the most misidentified sounds in the backcountry, the ones that terrify you for no reason at all, and the one sound most people sleep straight through that actually deserve their attention. I'm Ranger Jack. 17 years outfitting alpine and winter backcountry trips. No sponsorships, no brand deals, just what I've heard. Camp after camp, client after client, season after season. Number 7, the great horned owl. Here's why this one catches people off guard every time. It doesn't hoot like the cartoon owl in your head, that soft, friendly storybook sound. During territorial exchanges, especially in canyon country or thin alpine air where sound behaves differently, it can carry as a long, rising screech that sounds disturbingly close to a person in distress. You think you're hearing someone hurt out there in the dark. What you're actually hearing is 2 owls arguing over territory or courting each other from opposite ridgelines a half-mile apart. That sound travels much farther than you'd expect at night because there's no wind noise, no traffic, no daytime static competing with it for airspace, so it feels close. It almost never is. This is the one that ended a trip early in my career. A client group broke camp at 2 in the morning over exactly this sound. Packed up cold, shaking, hands fumbling with headlamps, absolutely convinced they'd just heard someone being attacked a stone's throw from their tents. It was 2 owls having a conversation. That night is the reason I brief every single group on this before we ever leave the trailhead now, because that particular flavor of panic is completely avoidable if you just know what you're listening to. One nuance worth knowing, barred owls specifically can produce a call that genuinely does sound like a scream, sharper and more human than the classic horned owl hoot. So this isn't always a clean, easy call, even for someone who's heard it 100 times before. But the pattern gives it away. A call, a pause, an answering call from somewhere off in the distance. That's not distress. That's a conversation. The next one sounds worse, and it's usually a fox. Here's the twist most people don't expect. The next sound on this list is not louder, not bigger, and comes from an animal a fraction of the size of an owl. And it still fools more experienced campers than the owl does. Number 6, the red fox scream. People get fooled by this one hard because it genuinely sounds like a person or a child in real and immediate trouble. It's a vocalization foxes make most often during mating season, from roughly winter into early spring depending on where you are, and it's one of the most consistently misreported human scream in the woods sounds on record. It shows up in local news stories almost every year in fox territory, usually with a headline asking whether residents should be worried. Search and rescue teams have been dispatched over this exact sound more than once, called in by well-meaning campers who genuinely believed they'd heard someone in danger. The failure point is simple and almost unfair. The call is short, sharp, and pitched almost exactly where the human ear expects distress to register. That's not something you can just reason your way past in the moment, even if you've heard it explained before. It stays unsettling. The real consequence isn't the sound itself, it's what it does to the rest of your night. You don't fall back asleep easily after that. You lie there running through scenarios, ears straining for a follow-up, and your entire next day on trail is built on 4 broken hours of adrenaline-soaked half-sleep instead of real rest. It sounds human because it's built to carry, not because something out there is actually wrong. Now the one almost every group already half recognizes, and still ends up panicking over anyway. Number 5, the coyote chorus. 2 or 3 coyotes can sound like a dozen surrounding your site. That's not exaggeration. That's genuinely how their vocal range works. They use pitch shifting and overlapping yips, specifically to make a small group sound much larger than it is, both to warn off rivals and to unsettle prey. So when you hear what sounds like a full pack closing in from every direction, you are very likely hearing 3 animals working hard to sound like 10. It's a technique researchers sometimes call the beau geste effect, borrowed from a story about a dying soldier propping up rifles to fake a bigger garrison. The animal making the noise is deliberately trying to sound like more animals than actually exist. The consequence here usually isn't real danger, it's escalation on your end. People start banging pots, shouting into the dark, sometimes fumbling food bags around in the panic, which is exactly backwards. That's precisely the moment you want calm, deliberate camp discipline, not chaos and noise, because sudden loud human activity in the middle of the night is far more likely to disturb your own group's sleep than it is to actually change what the coyotes are doing a few hundred yards away. One nuance worth holding on to: this doesn't mean zero caution is warranted. Basic food storage and general awareness around coyote activity is still worth doing every single night, regardless of how many individual animals you think you're hearing out there. But the head count running through your head is almost always wrong, and usually wrong by a wide margin. The sound is bigger than the group making it. Next up is the loudest thing in the forest that most people flat out can't place. Number 4, the elk bugle. If you've never heard this before, it is genuinely alarming the first time. A rising, almost mechanical whistle that breaks abruptly into a series of low grunts, sometimes answered a moment later by a second bull from a completely different direction, which only adds to the sense that something coordinated and unknown is happening around your camp. First-timers on a trip assume it's some kind of alarm call, or worse, an unfamiliar predator none of their trip planning covered. It's neither. It's a bull elk during rut season, advertising to females and warning off rival males. And it can carry an impressive distance across open alpine terrain where there's nothing to absorb the sound. The real outdoor consequence here isn't the noise itself, it's proximity. Rutting elk are genuinely more aggressive and less predictable than they are the rest of the year. And a bugle close to camp means a large, hormonally keyed up animal is somewhere nearby. Not that something is actively hunting you. That's romance, not a threat. But you still give it real physical space and keep your distance if you spot the animal. This next one isn't a mating call. It's a fight, and it's close. Number 3, the raccoon or opossum scuffle. This is the one that genuinely sounds like something is attacking your tent from 3 feet away. 2 small mammals fighting over food scraps or contesting territory near a fire ring or a poorly stored cooler produce a shocking amount of noise for their actual size, hissing, screeching, thumping through underbrush that sounds disproportionately large and violent in complete darkness, sometimes accompanied by a scuffle right against the outside wall of the tent that makes it feel like the fight is happening inside your camp instead of a few feet outside it. The real failure point here isn't the animals at all, it's your food storage discipline. If something's close enough to fight over scraps right next to your site, that's not really a wildlife encounter story, that's a camp setup story, and it usually traces back to something left out that shouldn't have been. A wrapper in a jacket pocket, a cooler left unlatched, crumbs never brushed off a picnic table. The consequence isn't injury, it's a completely ruined night's sleep over an animal roughly the size of a house cat, squaring off with another animal roughly the size of a house cat. The sound is scarier than the animal making it. Now the one almost every camper on Earth assumes automatically is a big cat. Number 2, the mountain lion myth. This is the big one, the sound everyone's genuinely afraid of and almost nobody has actually heard. Mountain lions are, for the vast majority of their lives, silent animals. Confirmed vocalizations do exist, but they're rare, and when they do happen, they tend to be short range and short in duration, not the long echoing scream that most people assume every unexplained night noise in cougar country must automatically be. What actually happens is chronic misattribution, a fox scream, an owl exchange, even wind noise on a bad night gets filed under mountain lion. because that's the scariest available label, and fear fills in whatever blank is left over. Part of why this myth is so sticky is that mountain lions are genuinely elusive by design. Many experienced backcountry guides go entire careers without a confirmed sighting, let alone a vocalization, which leaves a gap that imagination is happy to fill with every scary sound that doesn't have an obvious source. That doesn't mean mountain lions aren't a real backcountry consideration worth taking seriously. They are, and basic situational awareness in lion country genuinely matters. It means the dramatic scream that jolted you awake at midnight is almost never actually them. If you heard a scream, it almost certainly wasn't the cat. This last one isn't an animal at all, and it's the one people trust the least, even after 17 years of me explaining it around a fire, night after night, trip after trip, to people who still want to believe the scream had claws behind it. Number 1. The wind. After all these years running night briefings, this is still the sound that generates the most fear for the least actual cause. Wind moving through branches, temperature contraction creaking through tent poles as the air cools, fabric shifting and settling against itself, a loose guy line ticking against a rainfly. The brain, primed by every other sound already on this list and starved of visual information, converts all of it into footsteps, something circling, something deliberately approaching. The tell is pattern, and it's a reliable one once you know to listen for it. Footsteps are irregular, but rhythmic in a specific, weighted human way. Wait, pause, wait, pause. Wind is continuous and variable instead. It swells and fades unevenly. It doesn't creep toward you with intent. Once you know what you're actually listening for, this stops being frightening within a single season of camping. Until then, it quietly costs people entire nights of real sleep over absolutely nothing. Not every crack in the dark is a creature. So which sounds actually deserve your attention? Here's the short list, and it's shorter than you'd think. That's what to let go of. Now here's what I actually get up for, every single time, no exceptions. First, sudden, total silence. If insects or frogs that have been going steadily all evening suddenly go quiet at the exact same moment, that's not nothing, and it's not random. That kind of synchronized silence often means something larger is moving through the immediate area, and every smaller animal in earshot has already clocked it before you have. It's not automatically dangerous. It is absolutely worth sitting up, killing your headlamp, and just listening for a minute. Second, repeated, deep huffing or snorting close to camp. This is a genuine, deliberate warning behavior, whether it comes from a startled deer, an agitated elk, or a bear that's noticed your presence and isn't thrilled about the arrangement. Deer and elk use it as a stress signal to warn off a perceived threat before deciding whether to bolt. Bears use something similar as a clear, deliberate warning that you're too close for comfort. It's a purposeful signal aimed at you, not ambient background noise, and it's usually closer than it sounds. This is not the moment to assume it's just the wind and roll over. Third, consistent, directional movement toward your sight. Not one branch snap followed by silence, but a rhythm, weight shifting, brush moving, and the sound getting closer instead of fading away into the trees. That specific pattern is the one thing on this entire list that actually earns getting out of the bag, grabbing a light, and checking, independent of what brand your tent is, what your sleeping bag cost, or anything anyone's ever tried to sponsor me to say about either one. This is what I actually get up for. Before you write off every strange sound tonight or panic over the wrong one tomorrow night, run this quick check in your head. Listen to the pitch and rhythm first. Human distress is irregular in a specific way, while animal calls tend to repeat in a pattern once you tune into it. Check direction next. Is it stationary? Is it circling? Or is it actually closing distance toward you? Note duration. A single one-off call reads completely differently than sustained, repeated activity over several minutes. Consider the context you're in. Rut season changes elk behavior completely, mating season changes fox behavior completely, and the region you're in determines which animals are even realistically in play. A checklist built for alpine terrain doesn't automatically transfer to desert or coastal camping, so know what actually lives where you're sleeping. And pay close attention to sudden silence around your site, because the forest going quiet is information the animals nearby are already acting on, well before you've figured out why. None of this requires special gear or an app. It requires slowing down for 10 seconds before your imagination finishes the story for you. This is the exact same briefing I give every group before we ever leave the trailhead, because I would genuinely rather you hear all of this now, calm, in daylight, with your boots still dry and your gear still packed, than have to work it out yourself standing outside a tent at 2 a.m. in the cold, the way one of my earliest groups did years ago, over a sound that turned out to be nothing more than an owl saying goodnight to another owl a half-mile down the ridge. They didn't have this list. You do now, and it cost you nothing but 10 minutes of listening. So tell me, what's the sound that got you? What did you think it was in the moment, and what did you eventually find out it actually was? Did you ever break camp, lose an entire night of sleep, or scare yourself half to death over something that turned out to be completely harmless? Maybe you're still not sure what you heard, and it's bothered you ever since. Drop it below all of it. The sound, roughly where you were, and what time of year it happened, since that context usually makes the answer obvious. And if there's a sound out there you still can't identify, something that's never made a list like this one, tell me what it was. That might be exactly what we break down next.